Welcome back to the channel. Today we've got a brilliant chess battle packed with tactics, strategy, and surprises. Let's dive right in. Magnus Carlsen advances the queen pawn, immediately claiming central space and signaling a controlled strategic battle from the opening. Reza Mahdavi develops the knight toward the center, preparing flexible defense while keeping pressure on White's central ambitions. Magnus Carlsen brings out the knight, reinforcing central control and supporting the advance of his queenside structure. Reza Mahdavi pushes the central pawn, directly challenging White's presence and establishing a solid foothold in the center. Magnus Carlsen develops the bishop actively, placing early pressure on Black's queenside and eyeing long-term targets. Reza Mahdavi advances the kingside pawn, committing to a fianchetto setup and a solid defensive formation. Magnus Carlsen supports the center with a pawn move, opening lines while keeping his structure flexible and compact. Reza Mahdavi places the bishop on the long diagonal, contesting central squares and watching White's king position. Magnus Carlsen develops the knight, strengthening coordination and preparing safe kingside castling. Reza Mahdavi supports the d-pawn with a cautious pawn move, reinforcing the central chain and limiting breakthroughs. Magnus Carlsen plays a quiet pawn move, preventing pins and showing careful prophylactic thinking. Reza Mahdavi castles kingside, securing the king and completing early development. Magnus Carlsen develops the bishop toward the kingside, increasing piece activity and preparing middle game pressure. Reza Mahdavi develops the queenside knight, reinforcing central control and coordinating pieces. Magnus Carlsen castles safely, bringing the king to shelter and connecting the rooks. Reza Mahdavi activates the queen, attacking b2 and testing White's queenside structure. Magnus Carlsen jumps the knight forward, attacking the queen and gaining a clear tempo. Reza Mahdavi retreats the queen, keeping it active while avoiding immediate danger. Magnus Carlsen strengthens the center with a pawn move, preparing queenside expansion and stable development. Reza Mahdavi pushes the b-pawn, gaining space on the queenside but loosening pawn structure. Magnus Carlsen places the knight on c5, occupying an advanced outpost and attacking key queenside squares. Reza Mahdavi captures that knight with his knight, removing the outpost and simplifying the position. Magnus Carlsen pushes the b-pawn, attacking the queen and expanding on the queenside. Reza Mahdavi moves the queen to a3, keeping activity but stepping deep into White's territory. Magnus Carlsen recaptures on c5 with the pawn, opening lines and altering Black's pawn structure. Reza Mahdavi centralizes the knight, placing it on e4 to increase activity and pressure key squares. Magnus Carlsen blocks with the queen, challenging black's queen and defending important central points. Reza Mahdavi retreats the queen again, conceding initiative as white maintains control. Magnus Carlsen advances the a-pawn, undermining black's queenside pawns and preparing open files. Reza Mahdavi captures the pawn on c3 with the queen, gaining material but inviting simplification. Magnus Carlsen trades queens immediately, steering the game toward a favorable middle game structure. Reza Mahdavi recaptures with the knight on c3, activating the piece, but creating imbalance. Magnus Carlsen captures on b5 with the a-pawn, opening the a-file and weakening black's queenside. Reza Mahdavi recaptures on b5 with the c-pawn, restoring material balance but leaving structural weaknesses. Magnus Carlsen lifts the rook to a5, targeting the b5 pawn and increasing queenside pressure. Reza Mahdavi pushes the b-pawn forward, creating counterplay but exposing deeper squares. Magnus Carlsen brings the rook to a1, coordinating rooks and reinforcing control of the a-file. Reza Mahdavi advances the pawn to b3, pushing it deep and forcing white to react precisely. Magnus Carlsen blocks the pawn with a rook move, stopping its advance and keeping full control. Reza Mahdavi develops the bishop to 5, activating a piece and seeking counterplay as the middle game fully ignites. Magnus Carlsen captures the pawn on b3 with the rook, removing black's advanced pawn and fully stabilizing the queenside. Reza Mahdavi trades bishops by capturing on d3, aiming to reduce pressure and simplify the position. Magnus Carlsen recaptures on c3 with the rook, removing the knight and activating heavy pieces in the center. Reza Mahdavi places the bishop on e2, attacking key squares and slightly disturbing white's coordination. Magnus Carlsen pushes the c-pawn forward, creating a strong passed pawn and forcing black into immediate defense. Reza Mahdavi advances the e-pawn, trying to block the passed pawn and hold the central structure. Magnus Carlsen pushes the pawn to 7, placing it one square from promotion and increasing the tension sharply. Reza Mahdavi brings a rook to the c-file, concentrating forces to stop the dangerous pawn. Magnus Carlsen repositions a rook to b3, improving coordination and indirectly supporting central operations. Reza Mahdavi pushes the e-pawn again, opening the center and seeking counterplay. Magnus Carlsen captures the pawn on f5 with the bishop, removing central resistance. Reza Mahdavi trades bishops by capturing on a5, further simplifying the position. Magnus Carlsen recaptures with the knight, centralizing it and maintaining pressure. Reza Mahdavi captures the advance pawn on 7, with a rook, finally eliminating the promotion threat. Magnus Carlsen captures the pawn on d5 with a rook, penetrating deep into black's position. Reza Mahdavi advances the a-pawn, trying to generate counterplay on the flank. Magnus Carlsen repositions the rook to a3, keeping control and flexibility. Reza Mahdavi pushes the a-pawn further, gaining space, but lacking real support. Magnus Carlsen brings the rook to the 7th rank, attacking weaknesses and restricting black's pieces. Reza Mahdavi checks with the rook on cone, forcing the king to respond. Magnus Carlsen calmly steps aside with the king, maintaining full control of the position. Reza Mahdavi pushes the f-pawn, attempting to drive away white's knight and relieve pressure. Magnus Carlsen improves the knight's position, keeping active control over critical squares. Reza Mahdavi retreats the rook to chicks, adopting a defensive posture. Magnus Carlsen jumps the knight to h6 with check, forcing the king toward the corner. Reza Mahdavi moves the king to height, accepting a cramped defensive setup. Magnus Carlsen supports the center with a pawn move, preparing further central action. Reza Mahdavi pushes the f-pawn again, opening the center under pressure. Magnus Carlsen advances the e-pawn, challenging the center and opening lines. Reza Mahdavi shifts the rook to b6, defending laterally and limiting immediate threats. Magnus Carlsen brings a rook to c3, improving coordination and increasing pressure. Reza Mahdavi places the bishop on b5, blocking lines and defending key squares. Magnus Carlsen moves the rook to e7, attacking central pawns and dominating activity. Reza Mahdavi retreats the rook to chicks, remaining on passive defense. Magnus Carlsen repositions the rook to a3, keeping pressure and flexibility. Reza Mahdavi captures the pawn on e5 with the f-pawn, opening the center. Magnus Carlsen recaptures on e5 with the f-pawn, restoring structure and maintaining control. Reza Mahdavi moves the bishop to c4, activating it and watching central squares. Magnus Carlsen pushes the d-pawn, breaking the center and increasing pressure. Reza Mahdavi brings the rook to f6, defending the kingside and central files. Magnus Carlsen repositions the rook to c3, and Reza Mahdavi resigns, recognizing overwhelming pressure and a lost position. That's it for today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Now.